you see yourself represented in mainstream media?
I think in terms of like Western media, it's not as much as I would like. I think recently it's definitely improving, especially when Crazy Rich Asians was released earlier this year. I think just in general, like East Asian and Chinese representation will probably rise, hopefully. But I think growing up, I didn't really see that much representation or like an accurate representation of how I see my heritage.
Can you remember a particular example of where you've seen yourself represented?
Well, growing up, of course, I had Mulan, who is like still my favourite Disney princess. But that was, I think, the main thing for me as a child, is just having her, and she was obviously based on a Chinese poem. But other than that, I can't really think of many other characters that I properly related to in the sense of like heritage and where they came from.
What was the impact that that's had on you?
I think having her as a character was very good, also because she's a very strong, independent female character. So just as an all-rounder, she's very good for me. I think as a child, I watched a lot of Chinese TV shows, so it didn't impact me personally as much. But I do think it's a bit discouraging that when you're watching films in England or watching films made in America, that you don't see as well-rounded a representation of Chinese people or people from a mixed background.
Why do you think representation is important?
Well, I think although you can see yourself in characters who don't look like you or don't come from the same background, there's always something in it to be able to find a character that you really relate to, in the sense of they might have had the same types of life experiences as you. So I think it's just important, especially for young children, to be able to see themselves in all different ways in the media, and just to see like a well-rounded representation of their heritage and of their culture.
Do you see yourself represented in mainstream media?
Probably not. I mean, technically I'm Anglo-Indian, which is quite a niche group. But in terms of seeing people in mainstream media that have the same skin colour as me and look like me, not so much, no.
Can you remember a particular example of where you've seen yourself represented?
Yeah, this is really like weird, but there was a Doctor Who spin-off that a lot of people from my generation would have watched, that's called The Sarah Jane Adventures. And there's a character in that called Rani, which incidentally is my middle name, and that I think was the first time that I saw someone and I was like, that looks like me.
What was the impact that that's had on you?
I think the character herself was very clever, she did very well at school, she was brave, and I think that definitely had an impact on me. I think that definitely kind of inspired me, and I think just watching a TV show that everyone watches and being able to say that looks like me and I can relate to that, especially as she came from an Indian household, I think that was very special.
Why do you think representation is important?
I think the whole point of storytelling is to connect with people, and I think storytelling can really inspire people, and especially young children, it can inspire them to be better. So I think having more representation and having as much diversity as possible is really important so that everybody can relate.
Do you see yourself represented in mainstream media?
Before, no, but now, like, obviously movies like Black Panther and films like Get Out and stuff has been like really important to like my community, but before, no, so now it's been a bit more progressive and stuff.
Can you remember a particular example of where you've seen yourself represented?
Again, in like Black Panther, where like you see like black people like shown in royalty and in power, rather than in like films that are typically always about slaves, like 12 Years a Slave and stuff. So to see a different perspective about black people was really interesting to see.
What was the impact that's had on you?
Well, like, it's just showing me that like black history didn't just start from slavery. It started like before that, like where you had like Nubian kings and queens. It showed me that.
Why do you think representation is important?
Representation is important because when you're able to see yourself in a certain position, you can believe that you can do it too. So, for example, if I want to do something in media, if I don't see loads of people that look like me in that position, how can I think that I can achieve that too?
Do you see yourself represented in mainstream media?
I mean, like racially, yeah, definitely, because obviously, like Hollywood is predominantly white, but in terms of where I'm from, probably not so much.
Can you remember a particular example of where you've seen yourself represented?
I mean, like Red Sparrow, where like you had basically everyone who was Russian was either like dirt poor or they were like really rich oligarch KGB people. So it's kind of either spies or uneducated poor people.
And what was the impact that had on you?
When I was about 9, I thought that like the way for me to make it in life as like a Russian girl was to get myself in with the KGB, until I realised they were like a bunch of terrorists, and that's not really great. So yeah, that was the impact.
Do you see yourself represented in mainstream media?
Well, as a white person, yes, quite prevalently, which I think is a big problem. And I think that we should be doing more to integrate people of colour and more different diverse races into media. But specifically for Spanish or Irish, I feel like we're poorly represented in the fact that we're often stereotyped, and so it's like not presenting a real image of what we are, like the Irish drunkard or the Spanish kind of silly little person who runs around all the time. That's just not true.
Can you remember a particular example of where you've seen yourself represented?
Ooh, there's a lot of new Spanish TV shows on Netflix for some reason. There's been a massive influx in popularity on them. Things like Velvet and Elite. I feel like Elite has really been kind of promoting this image of Spain being a kind of normal country rather than just like this poor country which is in economic crisis. Like, it's kind of real life in Spain, and I think that's really important.
What was the impact that's had on you?
It's just really allowed me to see what it's like being there as well, because I never lived in Spain, but I do really identify with that side of me. So having that kind of dysphoria was really hard, but being able to see what life is like there, like properly, was really amazing for me.
And where do you think representation is important?
Where?
Why?
Or
Sorry.
why? I was like, everywhere. I think everyone should be entitled to representation. You know, freedom of speech is of course a thing, and so denying people access to media through film or TV or news is just, it's not great. It's denying them the right to speak and the right to express their own opinion.